Hi, with us today we have Michael Watkins. Michael is the Vice President's Solutions and Product Innovation at Global Knowledge. With over 20 years of experience in the training industry, Michael has garnered numerous awards in learning for the learning products he's created, as well as having been recognized as the Instructional Designer of the Year by the Institute of IT Training.
As we look around our own industries, perhaps our own businesses, it's apparent that there is an IT skills gap, that technology is advancing rapidly. And to be effective as a business, we have to make sure that our IT professionals have the skills that they need to help move our businesses forward, to help us compete globally and at the pace and scale that we now need to be able to. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, looking at some ways that we can do this and talk about what's really critical to make sure that there's a true acquisition of skills. So if we think about kind of where we are and where we've been, that guy on the left there, you might recognize, that's Martin Cooper. And you say, well, what did Martin Cooper do? Well, Martin Cooper back in 1973 invented the cell phone. Now it's a little bit more recent picture as Martin's posing with the initial prototype that he developed. On the right, you probably recognize that too. That's an iPhone X, an iPhone 10. So with this, we've seen tremendous changes exponential in all areas of technology. But think about where we've come in just that brief amount of time. In 1973, look at that brick that he's holding. I mean, my gosh, I'm surprised he's not using two hands for that. But if we were even to split the difference between where we are today, maybe with our iPhone that you might have in your pocket or in your hand at this moment, and where Martin was back in 1973, and we say, let's just put a stake in the ground. 1991 doesn't seem that long ago, at least not to me, maybe to some of you. If you were to use the technology that we had even just in 1991, that iPhone 10, the iPhone, to develop, it would cost you $3.56 million to buy that, versus, heading down to Best Buy where you can get it for about $849.95 on sale, something like that. And what's interesting is it's not just this type of technology, it's across all of technology. And can you imagine if everything in the world moved this fast? Futurist Brent Yak, he said the average car, if we used the same type of rapid exponential growth that we've seen in technology, if it advanced as quickly as our computers, cars would get over 3.6 million miles per gallon, and we would see prices driven down to less than $5,000. And that would just be absolutely tremendous, I think. But that gives you a sense of how much not just technology is changing, but the need for our technologists to change with it, more so than any other industry, really. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we keep pace with this change, and what does not keeping pace do to your business? And that's what Korn Ferry looked at here when they did a study of technology, media, and telecommunications, and really looked at the labor deficit. The digital skills gap, it's already hampering digital transformation of over 50% of all companies, and the gap's only widening. Korn Ferry predicts that by 2020, I mean, gosh, that's what, next year? Technology, media, and telecommunications, they may be as short of 1.1 million skilled workers globally. And what's really interesting about that is the unrealized output that represents. Look at that number. Over $112 billion is really what companies are, in essence, leaving on the table by not having a skilled workforce. And that sounds pretty bad, but if you really want to get scared, go ahead, look at the right-hand side of this graphic. By 2030, a mere, short distance in the future, we're talking about a skills deficit that could reach 4.3 million workers, and it could have a devastating impact on unrealized output of almost $450 billion. Now, if you think about just the worker shortage there, that's 59 times Alphabet's entire workforce is what that would be. So these shortages are predicted to cost the tech industry nearly $450 billion in unrealized revenue. So how are we going to make up for this workforce shortage? How are we going to make sure that we as business leaders help our industries grow and help our businesses realize the potential revenue that's out there? Well, one way is education. And education has really always been how we've moved ahead in technology, how our IT workforce has kept pace. But I think we can all agree that pace is moving insanely rapidly into the future. And there's one problem that every IT worker seems to have, and that's no time. So education, while it may be part of the answer, there's still a challenge for every single IT worker out there. In fact, Network World tells us that the average IT professional puts in over 52 hours a week. That's just in job time. Can you manage it? Imagine everything else that they're managing outside of the office. So where do they find time to integrate education to be able to keep up with that rapid pace of change? That's probably the single greatest challenge that we have in helping to realize that unrealized revenue that we talked about a moment ago. Is it's getting our IT workers, growing our IT workforce, and skilling them rapidly as technologies change. With this, businesses have a significant need for really measurable technical skills acquisition. They can't have employees spend 3 to 5 days traditionally in off-site classes. It's difficult to integrate learning into your busy work schedules. And that really highlights the need for flexibility. But organizations have also recognized that there's a certain need for structure to maintain motivation and engagement for learners as well. And so it's a bit of a quandary. How do we put those pieces together and address the needs of our IT workforce? Now, education has attempted to evolve to meet some of these needs to help us to close this critical skills gap, and that based on the ever-shortening time that professionals have to devote for education. And we've seen this. We've seen, we used to be back in 1990, back in 1980, you would send your IT staff out to a traditional 5-day class. They may even travel for that, fly to Chicago or to Dallas or someplace else to sit with an expert for 5 days to go through the material to gain hands-on experience. And it's a terrific way to learn. It's not a terrific way for businesses to keep pace with the rapid changes that they're facing in technology on a daily basis, and it's costly. So fast forward into the kind of mid-2000s, and we saw really the upswell of virtual instructor-led training. This drove down travel expenses, provided access to an expert online as the internet became ubiquitous, as the bandwidth increased. It was a lot easier, but we were still having to figure out how a busy IT professional, remember, what was that number was 52 hours a week, how are they going to integrate that time? And if they are, consider the distractions of sitting there, taking that same 5-day class online with incoming emails, text messages, that iPhone X ringing, and all the demands on your time. So it makes it tough. It's better. Virtual training answers some of the questions. It helps, but it's really not quite getting us there. So we've seen a surge in online training providers offering on-demand training, anytime learning. Now, this isn't new. I mean, if you've been in IT for a while, you may, like me, I've been around IT for ages now. I can remember, you would get your computer-based training when it used to come on a disk, right? And you'd put it in your giant laptop, and you would click through, and from companies like NetG at the time, that sort of thing. And it was a way to try to integrate training into your busy schedule, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It really depended upon the motivation of the individual. Now, access to training is a little bit easier when you think about what's out there from our on-demand providers. And the training itself is really, by and large, fairly good. The difficulty, though, is it's a little bit like going out and searching for a YouTube video. If I just want to learn one thing, I can probably go out and I can find a video on that. But what if I need to really be skills ready to take a project that's going to drive a good portion of next year's revenue forward? For that, I probably need to gain hands-on experience. I want to have an expert that I can talk to. I want to learn from colleagues and peers. And I really want to have the ability to quantify that skills transference as I come back into the job to make sure that I really am job ready with the new technology challenges that I know we're going to be facing. And that's a challenge when it comes to on-demand learning. So while it gives us that flexibility, it doesn't always give us that level of skills competence that we need. So I think we can agree that there's a number of things that any type of IT professional needs when it comes to training. They need flexibility. They need access to experts. They need access to cutting edge materials, and it has to be given to them in a way that they can digest this and integrate it into their work lives. So let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, let's talk about flexibility. Flexibility is terrific. The ability to gain access to training that you need when you need it is key. In fact, I'd say there's probably 3 keys here, and flexibility is one of them. The ability to integrate learning into the demands of not just your busy work life, but your busy life. But with flexibility, I would suggest that there has to be other pieces. We see flexibility in today's on-demand learning. And for a truly motivated professional who can sit down and go through hours of videos, this may be a good solution. They can work these in as they wish, at night, on the weekend, over the lunch hour, when they have a few minutes of downtime. But let's be honest, not all of us are always that motivated, especially when it comes to moving beyond maybe just learning one small discrete skill and picking up an entirely new technology or integrating a new technology into your bag of tricks that you already know. For that, you need a little bit more. You need to integrate that knowledge in a way that it makes sense. You need to be able to ask the questions of an expert so that you can think about the problems you face on the job and how this technology will help you to solve them. So unlike purely self-paced approach, you need to have flexibility, but you also need to have accountability. And with that, I mean more than just sort of exposure equals learning type of accountability. We all went through that for a time, right? Where we would invest in maybe large scale digital libraries and we would roll these out to our workforces and we would say, show me your reports and what did people touch? Well, if they touched it, they surely were learning from it. Well, they may or may not have been learning from it. We really weren't getting any true measures other than maybe a quick little 5-question quiz to tell us whether or not our IT professionals truly had skills transference. Could they go from that online class or digital media and bring those skills back into the job and be effective? Did they even really go through it, or did they simply click through? So accountability has to mean more than just exposure and a click count. It has to really mean that you're there with a cohort, with a group that you have a certain commitment to be there to help them in the way that they assist you. And having an expert to lead the experience is key. We've found we train well over 100,000 users a year in the world of IT and professional services. And this is something that's key to their success, having an expert to take them through content, not just to answer the questions, but to truly be there. That sense of accountability helps to motivate people, to get them into the material, to help to keep them on track, and to really make sure that learning's taking place. But like we said, the world's moving fast. Technology is changing rapidly. And when we give these self-paced materials oftentimes to learners, we're not always assured whether or not they're going to go through them. Yes, they're flexible, but are they really getting what they need? So pace and scheduling have to be a part of any solution that's going to meet the demands of today's IT workers and help us to close that skill gap as well. And with that, whether learners meet weekly or monthly, having a scheduled time that you come together with a cohort, with an expert, it's important to support that accountability that we talked about. But it also gives learners time to retain key ideas, especially when these events are spaced out. There's a concept in education called spaced repetition, the notion of presenting material again and again, but having time in between so that users can integrate what they've heard, what they've learned into their lives, into the way they think, into the way that they approach problems, and then presenting it once again helps to solidify that information. So having a solution that gives them access to experts, that has a paced schedule that makes sure not only are you going to get through the material, that keeps you accountable to the material, but also allows you the time to integrate and really absorb the material is important as well. It helps learners to better retain key ideas, gives them the chance to, gain practice with materials as well. And ideally, if that's happening in a real world setting, all the better. So those are really three key elements. And you would think if a solution pulled these together, we would expect to see learners who can take a concept and go back into the workforce very confidently and apply those skills. But really, there's something missing, even if we get those three pieces right. Training managers, and I would argue managers at all levels who deal with the skilling of their workers, are seeing limitations when it comes to really just flexible online solutions for learning. After years of really relying on digital training and going after this instead of the traditional 5-day class, the lack of really measurable results that the traditional classroom provided presents a bit of a problem. So there's a dilemma. Do we send people away for 5 days? Yes, it's got the pace that we talked about. Yes, it's got exposure to experts, but it's really tough to lose somebody out of your workforce for an extended period of time. Do I give them simply a digital solution that gives them great flexibility, but it doesn't really check the box on accountability? It doesn't give them access to an expert or other peers to learn from. I may not really be getting the building and transference of skills that we need. So the dilemma really points to a need here for an approach that focuses on producing meaningful and measurable results that incorporate structure, that incorporate pace, that incorporate accountability and flexibility. Or really more succinctly, I think it could be boiled down to flexibility with accountability. And I'll throw in with measurability as well. And if we've got that, then perhaps we've got a solution that's going to help us to better close this IT skills gap we're talking about. So the team and I, we embarked on this over a year ago, kind of digging in and thinking about really the challenges that we had in front of us and the challenges that all IT professionals face. And we developed something that we call Blended Live. And with Blended Live, we try to pull together a solution that meets those various needs that we've been talking about. So there are weekly learning assignments. So learners use a self-paced platform. They learn specific topic areas before testing their skills in hands-on labs. And they've got access to experts throughout this. So that need to have expert support, not just in a classroom, but throughout your journey. Because if you're giving learners flexibility, you also have to undergird that with support. They've got to be able to ask a question in that moment of need to connect the dots. Also, pacing content in these smaller chunks over maybe a multiple week period allows that paced repetition that we talked about a moment ago and helps learners to better integrate and absorb the material that they're being taught. We can also, when we do things this way, by mixing both access to an expert in a classroom and access to digital content to do at your own pace, give learners that sense of flexibility. But I think one of the key pieces to this that we see missing in pure, say, on-demand solutions is access to an expert. By having expert-led exercises and sessions that we integrate into Blended Live, this gives the learner the opportunity to really experience that transference of critical skills, the ability to build that knowledge and to build the skills to meet the expectations when they return to work. And pulling that all together with structure and accountability by creating these regular sessions, by having a program that's brief in duration but allows learners to integrate this into their work life, helps them to acquire the skills they need and move at a pace that allows them to meet the changing needs of business. But another piece that's important to us as we look at what we're creating here with Blended Live is that notion of really review and feedback. So when learners get together with an expert, they work on, and I'm going to unpack this a little bit, but they work on something that we call challenge labs. And what these allow the learner to do is to integrate the skills that they've been taught to really apply them to real world challenges. So the challenges themselves are built from IT experts who are taking things that they encounter every day in the field and transforming those into lab challenges. And then going a step further, actually going through and measuring the learner's performance of the tasks necessary to meet the challenge. So doing that review and spending the time really with the learner to make sure not only were they able to go through, a cookie cutter style lab, but presenting them with a lab where there are many ways they could solve that, but allowing them to work with an expert to see that their solution was correct, or to understand where maybe their solution missed the mark, or where maybe there's just a better way to do things. We feel that's an important piece of really creating skills transference and helping these learners to be confident when they go back into the job that they'll be able to face whatever the next project or the next challenge is that presents itself. So I've got a slide here that sort of may help you to make just a little more sense of this. So here's how a traditional class might roll out. Say that we take something like that we might traditionally deliver in 5 days. Perhaps it's a course focused on Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, or maybe something like project management, something that's traditionally delivered in a multi-day format. Those are fine ways to learn. They certainly are. And if you can take the time out of the office, it's a great way to be with an expert and with a cohort. But when you can't do that, when you need something that integrates into your work life, our approach here allows you to still gain access to an expert, still work through things with peers to have that peer learning, but also gain the hands-on experience and have that flexibility. So in this case, let's say that we've taken a 5-day class and we've put it into our blended live format. So the class would first meet with a virtual session where expectations are set, the course format is introduced, the initial challenges are discussed, and students are provided access to the online course content. Then, over the next 7 days, students will go through specific assigned portions of the on-demand content. They'll watch videos, they'll do hands-on practice labs, they'll complete knowledge checks. If they have questions, they can discuss these with other learners in the forum section, or if they've got something specific that's maybe hanging them up, they can reach out and gain mentoring support from the expert leading the class. When the class meets again 1 week later, it's in a brief, easy to consume 2 to 4 hour session. So no more of this 5 days out of the office, 8 hours a day, having to travel. It's a virtual session. It's meeting 2 to 4 hours, depending upon the topic being covered itself. And in that, we try to make the very most of the time. There's a quick content review, and then you're right into the challenge itself. Now, the challenge is a hands-on lab activity based upon a real-world scenario that's going to allow a learner to employ the hands-on skills that they would have built in the practice labs over the prior 7 days. Once the learners completed the challenge level, either individually or some of these might even be group-related activities, the instructor will go through and grade each participant's challenge lab and take the time then to review and discuss what was performed correctly, where changes could have been made, or how to maybe do something a little bit more effectively in the future. It's a great time for question and answer as well from the students. Then at the end of that session, content for the next week is introduced, the new challenge is introduced, and students head back off after that brief 2 to 4 hours into the real world with on-demand content that they can integrate into their work lives and their personal lives as they wish. Each week, we look at the amount of on-demand content that a learner is going to go through, and we make sure that it's not too much for a working professional to cover. Typically, this could range maybe 6 hours of content outside of the classroom itself that the student might go through in terms of labs and videos and such as well. They come back in, it's kind of shower, rinse, repeat sort of thing. They come back in, they do the next week's challenge, they ask questions of an expert, they interact with the cohort that they're taking the class with. And over a series of sessions, students are paced through the content. They're exposed to all the skills necessary to learn and face real-world challenges. And their application of that knowledge is graded by the instructor in a formal setting there within the challenge lab itself. And really what makes these so special are the challenge labs. The challenge labs are real-world based scenarios, and they're central to the blended learning experience because they give that learner hands-on experience and the ability to integrate the more discrete skills that they've learned in the week prior. These really immerse learners in the real-world types of tasks that they're going to be asked to perform with the technology when they go back into the real world, when they go back into their employer. And they're going to help the learner to integrate what they've learned in those discrete lab sessions prior on their own. And what they've, if you think about it in, I guess, learning terms, they'll have done a series of formative labs. And now this is a summative experience that really pulls it all together almost as a weekly capstone activity that allows them to integrate what they've learned. So when students complete that challenge lab, their work's assessed and a formal debrief actually takes place with the instructor. So you're getting that personalized one-on-one guidance about the challenge itself and the way that you performed with it. That way the students really gain that professional guidance and validation of their skills, and they can learn from asking that expert additional questions about areas they may have struggled with. Even if they got the answer, so to speak, right, there may be better ways or more efficient ways to do in the future. And if something's not quite what they did quite right, they have the chance to go back and correct that and understand that as well. In the case of something like certifications, maybe you're looking at earning your AWS certification, or you're looking at earning a Cisco CCNA or CCNP. That means that not only are you learning the material that's requisite to be successful, but challenges actually take you into the type of content that you're going to be asked on the exam. And so you'll work on a series of practice questions so that you better understand how the exam may present material and how to answer it effectively, and also understand why you would answer it in a particular way, so that we have that closure of theory with practice with what's being asked on the exam as well. That way students can review their progress, their overall score with the instructor, and they can drill down into those areas where they may need just a little bit more time and attention, so that they can walk out confident that they're going to be able to pass the certification exam and go back into their workplace having achieved that as a personal or professional goal as well. So by bringing together flexibility, accountability, pace, with real-world based challenge labs, we're able to achieve measurable skills acquisition. And learning has to provide this rich, immersive, hands-on experience for students to really come away with skills that they can use on the job. Ultimately, that's the short answer, right? How do we close the skills gap? We have to make sure that they have measurable skills acquisition. We can't do that from watching YouTube videos. We have to gain experience with the technologies at hand. We have to be presented with real challenges that allow students to integrate what they've learned and to apply it to real settings. By having these challenge labs as part of a flexible overall approach that allows students to integrate what they've learned and to integrate the learning process into their day-to-day demands, we really feel like this is one of the best ways for learners to get the skills that they need to be effective to help businesses to close this skills gap. So with that, I appreciate you guys taking the time. I can't see the questions, so Sarah's been minding those in the background. We'll probably take a few of those on air. But if you want to learn a little bit more about this, there are several links here on screen. Of course, this is all being recorded, so you can go back and catch this at any point. But for our complete list of offerings in the blended live format, and this is growing on a regular basis, you can go to globalknowledge.com/blended. If you want to understand a little bit more about why blended learning is a truly effective way to learn and probably one of the best ways for a working professional in the world of IT to learn, you can go to the link there and learn a little bit more about that as well. We also have a great video there out on globalknowledge.wistia.com. You can follow that link. The video will take you through key areas and aspects of blended learning. And if you want to see whether or not blended learning is right for you or right for your IT team members, we've got a great little delivery format tool that asks a series of questions that will help you to identify how do you like to learn best. At Global Knowledge, we feel it's most important. There's great ways to learn, but what's most important is making sure that as a learner, you're presented the material in the way that you can consume it most easily and the way that you're really going to learn and retain the material. By going through that delivery format picker tool, it'll tell you, hey, I'm a student who really thrives in a classroom environment, or I'm somebody who really needs video-based training because of my approach to learning or my life, or maybe blended's the best solution for me because I need access to an expert and the flexibility of meeting just once a week and integrating digital learning into the rest of my life with the pace that I need and the accountability that I need to keep me on track for my goals. So whatever way you like to learn, Global Knowledge has a solution, and that tool will help you to assess your learning needs, your team's learning needs, and to choose the right style of solution. So with that, let me ask Sarah, do we have any questions from the group so far?
Yeah, so I have a few here. So first one, what courses are available right now through Blended Live Learning?
Right, well, that's a great question. We've got a variety of courses that are out there and available right now. That link that I showed a moment ago will give you the whole catalog as far as what's available, but currently, we've got courses in the world of Cisco. For instance, if you're pursuing your CCNA or CCNP and route switch, we have those in blended learning. If you're looking at something like building skills in project management, we have courses in blended learning to support that. Maybe you are at really the beginning of your IT skills career journey and you need some of those foundational CompTIA courses. We have those as well. So that link is the best place to get up to the minute access to the current course list that we have. And this is a portfolio, as I said, that is relatively new to Global Knowledge and that we're continuing to build and add to quarter after quarter here in 2019 and beyond. Anything else, Sarah?
Yeah, so are you saying classroom training is poor and that blended learning is best?
Well, I don't think I'd quite phrase it that way. It's a great question, though. I think it kind of goes back to that format delivery picker tool. That's an acknowledgement right there that we all learn differently. Some folks are auditory learners, some are visual learners, some are more kinesthetic. And in the same way, classroom, on demand, or blended is going to fit differently for various learners. We believe that the best thing for learning is to gain access to an expert. And that doesn't just mean in maybe a pure video format, the ability to engage an expert, to ask them questions. We all know this from our own experience of learning. As you're exposed to content, you never quite know what you don't know until it's presented. And then as you're thinking it through, you want to ask that question. We can't always do that if we're just watching a YouTube video or something like that. But gaining access to an expert, whether that's in a classroom or in something like blended, is a great way to make sure that we solidify concepts in our own thinking and that we don't move forward with, misconstrued thinking and kind of hang ourselves up down the line. So blended learning is a truly effective way to learn. And I would say, if I had to pick, probably one of the best ways for a busy working professional to integrate learning that they need to be successful in their job. So if they want access to an expert, if they need flexibility, and if they really want to gain hands-on measurable skills, blended learning, I would say, is the best approach that brings all of that together.
Okay.
Anything else?
I have one more here, but I just wanted to say if there are any other questions, to go ahead and put them in that question box that's on your panel there, and I'll read that out to Michael as well. So last one that I see right now is it's So here's the question. It sounds like we're just combining self-paced learning and virtual training. So how is Blended Live different?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And in some ways, it is that combination of self-paced learning and virtual learning. And those two things, it's kind of like a mashup, right? It's like the old Reese's and the peanut butter commercial. First of all, just taking those things and putting them together, that is a little bit different in the sense. But what really makes blended learning special is the way that we've broken the content down into, if you will, bite-sized nuggets so that learners can go through it more effectively. And what truly sets it apart is the notion of the challenge-based labs. The challenge-based labs allow you to integrate the skills that you've learned throughout those self-paced sessions in a real-world context, and then get that validation by an expert who's going to go through your lab and give you the one-on-one guidance and feedback so that you know as you walk out of that class that you truly have mastered these skills. So by bringing those pieces together, you are right, whoever asked the question, we are taking things that already exist and we're sort of putting them together. But we're doing it in a very measured approach, in a tested approach. This is something that we began testing over a year ago, and it's taken a good long time to bring it out because we wanted to make sure that as we pulled together these elements, we did so in the right proportions, in the right ways, and we really tapped into those key aspects of learning to make it as efficient and as effective as possible for the learner. And that's really what we're seeing for those who are going through it. We're getting great comments and feedback about how effective this is, how confident they are as they come out of the class, whether they're headed for a certification exam or they're taking one of more of our skills-based courses and they're wanting to take those skills back into maybe a project that they've just been assigned and apply those on the job. So we feel like it's a very effective way to learn that does tap into some existing pieces in just the right measure and allows you to get that challenge-based experience to feel confident in the real world.
How long do you have access to the labs through blended training?
That's an awesome question because I got to say I totally forgot to talk about this. So unlike maybe a 5-day class that's ILT or VILT and you go through that and when it's done sort of thing, because this does integrate that on-demand digital learning piece with it, you have extended access to that digital learning portion, and that includes the labs that go with that. Now, it varies by class. Sometimes you have up to 90 days access. In other classes, you have 12 full months of access to content, and that access to content begins on day one of the class. So if you think about the example that I gave you, that class might run over, say, a 5 to 6 week period of time where you'll be dipping into that digital content, where you'll be using that lab access throughout that period. But then once that class formally wraps up, you still have access to that digital content. So that means if, for instance, you're working on a certification, you'll have gone through the class, hopefully you walk away feeling very confident. But if there's something that you need to look back at and you want to spend just a little bit more time on, you still have access to both the digital content and the labs so that you can continue to practice and reinforce the skills that you learned for 90, 120, maybe as much as 12 months. It varies by class, but you certainly have a long access period post-course to gain access to those materials and labs.
So I wanted to thank you, Michael, for walking us through Blended Live training and how it can help close the IT skills gap. I also wanted to just take a few minutes to showcase everyone that in addition to global knowledge courses, on our website you can find learning pathways, certification tracks, and a robust resource library full of recorded webinars, white papers, articles, and case studies. So it really does go well beyond the courses, as well as there is a continual free webinar training that we do. Similar to this one, we are running at least 2 a month, so please keep an eye on our live webinar calendar, which is also on the website.